I just want to make sure I can transition between the two things.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's a long time standing there, Kelly. Said 2 minutes is a long time standing there.
We got 7.
Kelly, you want to get the mics? We'll just make sure the mics are ready.
Yep. Good. Okay. I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. Let's first do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to adopt an agenda. Can I have a motion, please? Gus is first. Bob is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Tonight, before we get going, I'd like to make a few announcements. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the fact, and the board sends its sincere condolences to Kelly DeFisciani and her family on the passing of her father last week. So your family's in our thoughts and our prayers always. We're so sorry. And additionally, tonight we pay tribute to one of our own, board member, Gary DeLallo, in his passing this past weekend. I'd like to say a few things. Our board and our school community tonight recognizes the passing of our board colleague and friend, Gary DeLallo. For those that did not know Gary, I'm going to let you know a few tremendous things about him. 19 years on this board, sitting around this table, dedicated to our students and our community. This is his 6th term on the Shenendehowa board. He has served as vice president for 2 years and president for 2 years. Gary also served on the Capital Region BOCES board. Retired school teacher who taught social studies in Mechanicville, he often pulled on those experiences as he talked around this board table, and he related those experiences to what we were doing here at Shenendehowa, and would often have a good tit for tat with Dr. Robinson, Bob, when he would bring up issues, concerns. He and his wife Carol have 3 children who have all graduated from Shenendehowa. He was an articulate representative for the Shenendehowa district with local government and various school and community committees. Gary exhibited a strong commitment to the pursuit of excellence for our students and staff. He had an innate understanding of significant power of education coupled with an appreciation of organizational culture, making for a consistent and steadfast focus on progress. One of the things that Gary did, one of the many things that Gary did, was he was successful in defeating the government's Cadillac tax. His efforts, again, as a board representative to NYSBA, helped defeat a federal effort to reduce the number of high-quality health programs school districts were offering their employees. 19 years, experience, stability, detailed insight, a true public servant, a positive gift to this district. On behalf of Christina, Bob, Todd, Naomi, Gusta, and myself, Godspeed, Gary. I'd like to offer, please, a moment of silence. Thank you. Dr. Robinson?
Thanks, Deanna. My apologies. Before we transition to the presentation, I just want to offer a sentiment about Gary. You know, we are fortunate sometimes in life to have people pass our path or we pass their path. And as I sit here today, in my 16th year as superintendent, I got to tell you, if it wasn't for Gary DeLallo as an individual, I would not be the superintendent of Shenendehowa. The board at that time was pressed. Gary, Bill Casey, several people, Janet Gray, people on the board, was pressed, and the question was asked, why would they hire one, this young guy, and two, this young black guy to be the superintendent of the school district? Gary's comment was unequivocal. He's the right man for the job. I remember that, and that vote of support, and for every year, Gary always said, I still believe you're the right man for the job. I share that with you because he and I had many, many conversations. And it's important for, I think, this community to realize that there are many people who have made us great. And he was one of the good guys. He was one of the good guys. And I hope that people don't forget that he was one of the good guys. He was one of the people that spoke his piece and spoke his piece for the right reason. So I would like to join the board and the school community to also say to the DeLallo family, thank you for lending us him for 19 years. And now with my parents, Kelly's father, we have another angel in heaven looking down on us, knowing that we're going to do all the right things for the right reason. So I want to say thank you, Gary. You won't be forgotten, my friend. You won't be forgotten. Thank you.
If it's appropriate, I'd like to share. I'm not sure if you heard me. This is Naomi.
Go ahead, Naomi.
Thank you. Um, so people come into our lives, and whether we see or know it at the time, they leave an impression. And Gary Delalo left a positive impression on me, and I dare say he's done the same for everyone around this proverbial board table. To say my heart is heavy, focuses on my grief, knowing that he will no longer sit at this table, and he'll no longer be a mentor to me. But I believe it's so very important to recognize and celebrate Gary for what he's brought to this board, for public education, and the community. As Deanna has shared, he's been in this community for a very long time, 40 years. He's been married for about as long, has 3 children that have all gone through Shenendehowa, and he is in his 7th term. And if he were to finish it, he would have been served for 21 years. I'm not aware of anyone that served longer than Gary. I know I did not know Gary before joining the school board, but over time our friendship grew, and he took on the role of my mentor. And we've debated many topics. We're both very passionate about education, but he's always been incredibly thoughtful, kind, and especially patient. He knows how to listen. He listens. He knew the importance. He knew the importance of civility and respect, and he was the model of both. Gary was always willing to make time for others. And one of my prouder moments was nominating him for the Edward Dwyer Award. And that's an award that not only recognizes outstanding board members, but one of its goals is to provide a role model for junior and new board members. And Gary was a role model. He was an exceptional role model. I learned so much from him. To say that he's committed his entire life to education is not an exaggeration. Before serving on our board as president and vice president, as long as many years as a board member, he served as a middle school educator for 28 years. And as has already been mentioned, but I want to just emphasize again, he was also NISBA legislative liaison for many, many years in our capital, and served on the Capital Region BOCES board. And he prepped me for that role as well. He is a selfless person. He gives and gives and gives. He served on so many committees in this, he served in many ways and on committees in this district.
Naomi?
But more recently, his passion for inclusivity and
Can she hear me?
equity has shined. He's been an advocate for our children and
Naomi?
challenge widely held assumptions. I just want to recognize, I want it to be recognized that he respects his peers, colleagues. He's respected by community leaders, but especially me. He's made our world better and has changed it for the good. My heart and sympathy goes out to his wife, Carol, his children, families, and friends, and I want to thank them for sharing Gary with us.
Thank you.
Motion? I don't think we took a motion for agenda.
I didn't?
I don't think we did.
Oh, my God, I'm sorry.
You may want to, I think that's
I may not have, you're absolutely right.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I
She did. Vanessa, you did. You did.
did? Okay.
Okay,
Yeah. I went with that first, and then I went into the comments. Yeah, sorry, Bob.
no problem.
I think you were actually second, Bob.
Okay, never mind.
So,
All right, so can someone explain to me what just happened?
nothing, but just a logistical piece we had to deal with, Naomi.
Okay.
I felt it really important to say these things for Gary. Gary has done so much for this community. He should be recognized.
But by the way, just so for the public, I spoke to Mrs. DeLallo today, and the obituary for Gary should be out on Sunday. There will not be a service as a result of the COVID situation we're in. However, there will be a planned celebration of his life this summer at which point I'm sure there'll be many people and many opportunities to offer comments and recognition for Gary. So as we get the information, we'll share. And in the obituary will be a request to make any donations to the Jonesville United Methodist Church, as well as the Shriners Hospital. So more to come on that, so I appreciate that. Just to transition from this, and thank you very much, Mrs. Stevenson, for allowing me that moment to be a person. We have some business tonight that we have to discuss and share information, and so we'll commence with that. I'm going to ask Mrs. Carmen to come forward. We just modification to the agenda briefly. We're waiting for a presenter to show up regarding the enrollment piece. So until then, Mrs. Carmen will come up and do a brief presentation related to community ed and community services. Mrs. Carmen?
You're okay with me standing back here, right?
Yeah.
So I'm far enough away from everyone?
Yeah.
So tonight, just a really brief overview of community education and community services. And if you'll see here in our very brief presentation, one slide, two slides actually, the title page and the second page, but really just trying to show you all the work that is actually happening, even though we are living with COVID-19 and a pandemic right now. Community education and community services are still moving forward with various initiatives, and also just making sure that anything and everything that we're doing is aligned with our reopening plan, and also in alignment with CDC, Center for Disease Control, and Department of Health protocols. From a community education standpoint, we have not been operating any community education courses since March, and we will not be at this point. The only thing we are looking to pilot at this point is driver education that we are looking to offer in the spring to our students who are eligible. And when I say pilot, it's the New York State Education Department has let up a little bit on some of the regulations, and we can be a little bit creative on how we're delivering the instruction. We can deliver it remotely, which in the past we could not. In addition to the in-car instruction is going to be the responsibility of the parent, but with guidance and some specific documents and evidence that that Bell's Driving School has been working with us on. So I say pilot because of the fact that parents are going to be responsible for the in-car component, and we will obviously be responsible for the actual instruction, the classroom instruction. So there's going to be more information coming out about that. And then the second piece of community education is looking at how we can offer virtual options for people in the community as well as for our staff and in different classes to keep the community engaged on what's happening in school. Community services, pretty much the same type of mindset. We aren't, again, renting our facilities to outside groups. We are slowly looking at how can we get clubs started or the color guard, those types of groups started, and ensuring that, again, everyone is adhering to the proper protocols that we have. And there's a lot of them that they have to adhere to. So making sure all those pieces are in place, people are self-certifying, who's overseeing, who's coming to visit, to make sure all these things are happening, and really just continuing to keep the collaboration and communication happening with the community to ensure that we are passing on important information that's happening in the district, that we are working together with you as a community, that we have the safety of our staff and students as a priority, and we are invested in you as the community. So that's pretty much where we're at as far as community education and community services go at this point. Are there any questions?
Thank you for continuing to step outside the box and keep some of these things going.
Yes. Thank everybody behind the scenes too. So
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Transition, Michael. We have our annual enrollment forecast. As I said, there was for whatever reason, there was a delay in the presenter coming. And I'm just wondering if the person is here yet.
Bob walked out.
So if the board doesn't mind, if we wait a minute
Yeah.
to do so. While we do that, just want to share a few things with the board that's of interest. Certainly, this board has been engaged in conversations related to equity and diversity and anti-racism over the past, particularly so over the last several months, but certainly as a district for probably 10 plus years. And we have our students engaged. Grace was just recently on the call. We have a very vibrant committee that has 3 very active subcommittees, and looking forward to recommendations coming to the board in the new year, the 2021 year, with some action steps that's being taken. We're also gearing up for the next board policy review to start having some conversations related to our code of conduct policy and some modifications related to that. And I also shared with the policy review that we'll have some conversation surrounding the NISBA equity policy that was shared with the board as a potential model that we could look at as well. So a lot of action taking place here at Shen. And I would also like to acknowledge my colleagues, your peers in NISCU for some of the work that they're doing in NISCUNA. And I do so because oftentimes people want to pit one district against the other. At the end of the day, we're talking about societal issues. So to say who's first, who's second, who's third becomes irrelevant. It's about making sure that everyone is in the game and has a chance to fairly play the game and has a chance to have the positive outcome of the game of life. That's what I mean. And so it's important for us to do so because the work that we're trying to do here and my colleagues and yours across the state and the country for that matter isn't only a work about morality, about what's right or wrong. It's about a work of ethics. And what I mean by that is it's about having awareness, having the type of judgment to not only determine if something's right or wrong, but to take the necessary actions. Pronouncements are great, but at the end of the day, it's what's actually happening and what's the results. And as the board know, and you hear later on when we start talking about some budget assumptions and expectations, it's not only about the opportunity, but it's also about outcomes. We can say, but what's the outcome? What is the outcome telling us? So we're pleased with the efforts that's ongoing here as a school system. And again, want to applaud this board for being out front and center with this conversation, knowing that these conversations are critical conversations, and some people use the word crucial conversations. These conversations are sometimes uncomfortable conversations, but just like any change, any progress, there has to be a degree of discomfort. And because if it's not, you're not doing anything differently, to be quite frank with you. So again, I just kind of want to share that because as things pop up in the news, the tendency is for people to take sides. We don't take sides against issues that talks about the advancement of society as a whole. It's not about sides. It's about how we try to move in tandem with each other and support each other as we all move down the journey of life. So we're pleased to do that. And I particularly, again, we had a champion even in Gary DeLallo. We had Bob Presley put together a schematic in terms of how we could potentially as a board act on some stuff. We have several board members serving on committees. We have you, Mrs. Stevenson, as our board president who's been on many webinars as a part of your leadership journey with us as a board. We have Grace, board member here, which Grace, as I'm sitting here looking at you, I'm thinking that we probably should have you, if you have time, I'm not sure you have this time as a student, to even sometimes be on our policy review piece and have a student perspective on that as well, particularly when we talk about some of these policies that have a direct contact on students. It's difficult when you're in class, right? We can't pull you out of class to be on a policy review meeting, but it might be a great excuse. So it's a bigger life lesson than probably some other things, right? So I share that with the board because those are some of the things that we're contending with as we sit here as well as the system. So I'm just going to continue, if the board doesn't mind,
Okay.
and until we figure out what's the status of our presenter to talk about enrollment piece. So person probably won't be here for another 25 minutes or so, which should be fine. So with the board indulgence, I'd like to talk about, we're talking about forward thinking and positive thinking and where we are as a system. And so I'll just turn slightly here so we can get the presentation on the screen. As we sit here, typically at this time of the year is when we start engaging in conversations about the budget. And the kind of theme, if you will, as we look to 21-22 is reimagining education with resilience and fortitude. And those two words become important because it not only speaks to the psychological piece of it, but also speak to the sense of determination to stick to the course, stay true to our North Star as a system. And right now we need both. We need both to say we can't abandon where we're trying to go. We have to have the psychological pieces to fight through it, to champion through the challenges so we can stay true to our commitment, our mission as a school system. Because the coming year will be a greater fiscal challenge potentially for us than this past year when we had a lot of gyrations with the budget process and things of that nature. So we have to be geared up for that. And so the board is familiar with this particular graphic, which again is basically putting our mission statement in action steps in terms of the things that the budget does. The budget from my vantage point isn't about dollars and cents. It's about how effectively we use the investment of resources to meet the various demands of our school system. So it's important to talk about those things that we want to do to actualize our school district mission. And I just want to point this out. The two objectives you see here, objective 2 and 3, are based upon the current district goals that are adopted for the current year. I revised objective 1 because objective 1 speaks to how do we capitalize and maximize the COVID experience. How do we look at the things that we're doing right now and maximize those things to move forward? Because there's so many things that we are doing differently, so many ways we're using resources differently right now that we have to be able to capture the best of those things and use it and leverage it into the future years. And so that's why I put here the revised piece of it, because we have to do those things to continue to recalibrate, realign how we provide education. Because as we sit here in November, we have no idea what September is going to look like. We have some assumptions about September based upon our current situations. However, there's so many things that could potentially change that impacts that, but we have to figure out how do we maximize our lessons of the past, our lessons currently to have a better view of the future. So that's the one change. This slide hasn't changed as well. The layout, the graphics somewhat different, but it speaks to the whole notion of our North Star in terms of ensuring that we are doing the things to provide an equitable environment, equitable learning environment, learning opportunities for our students, to ensure that we're looking at the experience within the classrooms, and is the experience inclusive? Is it embracing kids where they are and taking where they ought to be? Is it recognizing the difference in learning styles, the different environments where kids are learning? I mean, when you think about it right now, we have kids learning from their living rooms or learning from their bedrooms. Or I was just on a meet the other day, a parent set up a whole little thing for the kid in the garage. I hope that they have heat in it right now. But it was pretty fascinating. And I was talking to another family where the grandfather made the child her own special desk out of some log wood he cut down. It was special for her for this learning piece of it. Because so a lot of people doing creative things to keep their children inspired when they're learning in different environments. And so this inclusive piece is make sure that we're doing those things to embrace all those things, all those different ways kids are embracing or engaging education. And the diverse piece of recognizing there's so many things that we're doing now that we would have never imagined that we could have done or should be doing. And I would anticipate those things are going to continue to change as we move forward. Many things are challenged, but many, many more opportunities. And so we're looking forward to embracing those things through that lens of equity. And so with that being said, I try to paint this picture so one, we can wrap our heads around it as a system in terms of how do we manage from a fiscal perspective or plan from a fiscal perspective with the potential of so many unknowns, right? And so this graphic kind of talks about challenges, opportunities, and then an assumed reality. And so the assumed reality just isn't some blind guess. It's based upon what we know, both challenges and opportunities. We know that some challenges that are looming, the potential reduction of state aid is a challenge that's on the table. That if that 20% reduction in state aid is realized, it could be devastating for school districts across the state, and certainly a major challenge for us here at Shen. And so we're watching that very closely, and that even that is the question is even 20% of what? Is it 20% of our foundation aid, which is about $5.5 million potential reduction, or is it 20% of all our aid, which now is about $9 million in reduction? So those are huge question marks, and so clearly what happens at the federal level has a huge impact on the outcome at the state level, and subsequently the impact on us here at Shenendehowa. And this is not a political statement, but I was pleased, and I've heard it several times now, that the president-elect, First Lady, who's an educator, who's advocating strongly for public education, and looking forward to the transitions even at the Department of Education level, because all those are individuals that ultimately influence how federal funds flow into the state, and subsequently how state funds flow into local school districts. And it's not a political statement. It's a reality statement that we have to know that the national state impact has a direct impact on our capacity as a local level as we move forward. So those are some clear challenges that we have to encounter and plan for as we move forward. Some opportunities that we have. We've been capitalizing on the opportunities coming out of the last school year, when we went from March to June in the what I call the shock of COVID period, where we just pivoted on a dime, to this year when we have learned from the experience and doing some things differently. So how do we then look at the fiscal management piece of it? And as you heard back from the auditors back in October as an independent audit report, the district is in a physically healthy place, which is good to be, because if we have to embrace those challenges, we want to embrace them from a place of strength and not a place of weakness. So that's an opportunity that we have to be able to face those challenges differently. Looking at advocacy, there's a lot of the Educational Conference Board, ECB, is an organization made up of statewide organization, be it NICET, all the different union groups, and they've come together to have a single voice in advocacy. And this year, that single voice is going to be more necessary than ever before, because we have to have a unified, uniform focus as a state in terms of advocacy for funding, not only at the state level, but advocacy for funding at the federal level as well. And so we look at those kind of things because, quite frankly, without some federal intervention, school districts will be in absolute trouble in the state of New York, and I would say across the country, period. So that's going to be an absolute thing that we all have to advocate strong for. And we through the Capital Region BOCES, have been doing a lot of advocacy already, meeting with our federal folks, be it Gillibrand or Tonko or Stefanik, all those folks. We're having conversation with everyone and anyone who's willing to listen, because it's important for people to understand the implication on the ground level. What's the impact on the ground level as we move forward? And so our assumed reality then is still academic and operational excellence. That doesn't change. That doesn't change. That's always going to be our North Star as we move forward. Continuity of academic instruction in the three dimensions is still very much a possibility.
And so we have to plan to say, what does that look like, and how do we enhance if we have to still have an in-person CVL hybrid option? How does that look different? How does it look better, stronger, more accessible for our young people in moving into we have to plan for those things and have those things in place. So those are some of the assumed realities that certainly make planning a challenge, because not just planning for one thing. It's kind of like, my household where everyone eats something different. And so we have to cook 4 different meals because everyone eats something different. One is gluten-free. I don't eat meat. One is this. And so all of a sudden we have to plan for everything, because if you only plan for one, many people will be left out of the sequence. And we can't do that for our kids and the way that kids are accessing education at this moment. So that's the assumed reality. Just to kind of pick up the pace a little bit here, some of the things that we have looked at in the past, we will continue to look at. Kathy Chase and her folks continue to work very closely to contain the cost of health insurance. Right now, we're looking at maybe around, at worst case scenario, about a 2% adjustment, which is unheard of, 2% beyond what we're doing now, because we're doing a lot of things to contain the health insurance costs as we move forward in terms of the overall impact on premium. Pension costs is going to be a slight adjustment from where they were this past year, but it's the 22-23 year that we got to watch out for, because it's how the market cycle is always delayed that impact pension and investments in pension. Collective bargaining, we're gearing up to start conversation with our CSCA bargaining units, our supervisory units, SUSA, as well as our administrative units, SAW. So we're gearing up for those negotiations in the coming months. So it's going to be a busy January, February, March, April for a lot of folks as we move forward. The equity piece is still a big piece of it. When we think about special ed, it's going to be the continuity of services and also trying to address gaps, because we know the virtual learning is a challenge for many kids, and it's particularly a challenge for some special education kids. And so how do we make sure that we're trying to bridge those gaps as fast as we can so we don't have continuous separation as we move forward? Enrollments you're going to hear about tonight, just a little preview. Our enrollments are relatively flat. So that's a good thing in the sense that we're not dealing with huge spikes in enrollments, so we could better plan and manage those situations as we move forward. Mental health is something that we've been constantly focused on, and we're going to continue to focus on that much more in a much more integrated way. And also from an equity standpoint, in the sense of making sure it's not trying to do a one-size-fit-all approach to it, versus really trying to understand the various needs and address the various needs with different approaches. So that's also one of those areas. Integration for technology is a big one. Technology is driving the day, period. And we are fortunate that we in the past made a lot of great investments that we're capitalizing on right now. And so how do we keep making those investments? How do we keep investing so to have capacity so essentially that we can essentially, I don't even call it a one-to-one, but a capacity for all our learners to be able to access technology virtually if we are compelled to do so. So we want to do that. But not only that, I've seen kids, even in this library, as I sit here, in class use technology so different with each other. And be able to communicate much more effectively, even within person, using technology, which is a beauty of. So sometimes people think technology is when we have distance between us. It's also when we're in the same space, how we use technology to enhance that learning experience. And so we look at more of those kind of things. And certainly, safety is always going to be a continued piece for us as we move forward. So the point I'm making to the board is that we're looking at the challenges, we're looking at also the opportunities, and then we're trying to see what the assumed reality might be. In terms of things, value add is always one of those things we're trying to figure out in terms of academic capacity, academic rigor. Effectiveness is, again, repurposing. A lot of these things you've heard me say year after year, because these are the steps that we take to realize the successes that we design our system to deliver. And so those things become important for us as we move forward. Again, I'm not going to go through the number sequence here, but there's a lot of data points that we look at that still give us indication that as a community, we're still a fiscally strong community, and we can continue to support the expectations that people have that in terms of what we have to deliver to our students. And so that's what this graphic will be in terms of the tax implication. And look at the data. Data proof for itself. For the past several years, our tax impact has been pretty flat, in some cases decreasing, with some exceptions of some towns that went through full value equalization over recent years. So those are the kind of things that's important. So at the end of the day, this is what we're trying to do here. We want to make sure that we're looking at the district from a holistic perspective. We take into consideration the diversity of needs as well as the diversity of opportunities, and we're trying to build a circle that includes more people and not one that excludes. So if you kind of look at it from that graphic standpoint. And so those are the assumptions that we're going into the budget process with. And as things unfold, as new information come to a head, we'll take all those things into consideration. So I'll pause there, see if there are any questions, initial comments, thoughts that the board may have.
I like the slide where you showed the first goal is being revised, because typically when we do this, there's not a lot of changes, but now you put a very big change up front that lays out, this is a different year, and not just where the dollars are at and where potentially they come or may not come from, but it's also the idea that you have to capitalize, and it's not just the narrow band of things, but the whole broad band of things that you have to capitalize on. So thanks for including that.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is the part of the outward part to the process, so to speak. I say that because there's tons and tons of analysis taking place every day. Again, kudos to Mrs. Chase and her team. When you think about, we analyze where they give credit where credit is due, analyze so many different what-if scenarios, so we could truly have some sense of when we start, if this doesn't happen, then what's the implication? And we do that before we even think about making a decision. Because we don't want to make a decision and say, oh, I wonder how it's going to work out. We want to say, here's how it's going to work out, and now we're going to pull the trigger because we have a pretty good sense of how it's going to work out. So when we come to the board, come to the public, we're not coming with our fingers crossed. We're coming with, barring something major that no one could ever anticipate, this is how it should play out. And it has played out well, and we hope they'll continue to do so.
Dr.
Can you
Robinson,
s- I'm sorry, Gus, go right ahead.
when will we have a better idea as to what we'll be getting, or what, when we'll, usually spring?
So customarily, and I say customarily, the governor would come out with his budget numbers right after the new year. We start hearing some numbers related from the governor. So we'll see. I have a feeling that's all going to be delayed
Yeah.
because of the transition at the federal level. So however, what sometimes no news is in fact good news. And right now, the state has delayed saying anything because I think everyone is watching to see how things unfold at the federal level. So I would anticipate that probably end of January, beginning of February, we'll start getting, because the state still has to pass its budget for April 1. So they're doing their work, and so we're going to see what the assumptions that they're using in developing their budgets for April 1. And so that's going to be our first glimpse at, okay, do we have a real chance, a fighting chance, or no chance?
Right.
And so I think that's going to be our first glimpse right after the new year.
Thank you.
So we started to talk about this in April, May, right? When we had those, we had 3-4 scenarios, right? So we've been prepping for this. When you say that you have been every scenario, because you got to go from the worst case scenario, right to the fun. So, yeah, and happily, hopefully this will have a good ending, right? Because we're talking about the national stage right now. And it does look like, optimistically, we will be not going to that worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So more to come on that as we move forward. So with board indulgence, I just want to shift back to our enrollment presentation and ask Mr. Miller to come forward and introduce the. So Mr. Miller, we're only going to go to the brief presentation part, right? So which one? Is it the presentation one or the?
It should say the one that says presentation.
So
The other one's the actual booklet.
So is it?
That one, I think,
Okay.
is. Okay, so we brought Josh. You remember Josh from last year, Josh Toshi?
Hi, Josh.
We brought some paper copies up also for the board, which I'll distribute. Josh, probably the best place to go is in between those two.
Thanks, Bob.
You sure we found protocols here, Mr. Mayor? Not that I don't trust your hands are not clean.
Mr. Melia, can you send,
Please send me this right now.
can you make arrangements? I can stop by district office and pick up a copy. Okay.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, should I keep my mask on while I do it?
You had a good distance, I think.
You're okay.
I'll just keep it on. Okay, well, oh, sorry, should I speak in this? My name is Josh Tossi. I'm from the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. Some of you may remember me from last year. I gave the same presentation. I'm here with the updated numbers for the 2020-2021 school year. And before I start, I just want to say if you have any questions during this, please feel free to shoot a hand up or stop me. Or if you can't hear me, please let me know and I'll speak up or whatever I need to do. Okay, so just some background on CDRPC. We're a regional planning commission. We work with municipalities across the capital region, across the 4 counties. We do all kinds of analysis. We do economic, environmental, all that kind of stuff. I'm kind of the data guy. I work with all the data. I take it in and make charts and graphs and make it usable for people. So that's kind of how I fit into the school enrollment projections. So I just want to give an outline of how the projection report is going to go. I apologize in advance. My presentation is a little bit out of order from the booklet. So if you're following along, you might have to jump around, and I apologize. But I tried to write down some of the page numbers so I could kind of show you where I am. But just, we might have to jump around, so I apologize. But I'm going to start with the actual versus projected enrollment, which means what I projected last year and how the enrollment actually turned out this year. It kind of gauges accuracy and kind of shows what changed, and I can kind of go into a little bit why the numbers might be a little different or why they might be a little closer than we anticipated. Then we're going to go into the past 20 years of enrollment data. So we're going to kind of show where the district has been the past 20 years, going back to 2000, to kind of get a sense of how the enrollment has changed, and if current enrollment is along that trend or on an accelerated trend or whatever. After that, we're going to go to trends in the birth rate in the district. I'll explain that more when we get there. And then we're going to go into housing and development data for Clifton Park and Half Moon. And then we're going to get into the actual enrollment projections. So that'll be projecting through the next 5 years up to 2025, 26. It's harder to talk in these maths than I thought. To start, I want to explain what the survival multiplier is, because I'll probably be referencing that a few times throughout the presentation. So the survival multiplier is how we make the projections, and basically what that means is if there's 100 kids or 100 students in first grade in 2019-2020, and then this year in 2020-2021, there's 120 students, then that's a survival ratio of 1.2. And what that means is that there was a positive number of growth between years. So from first grade last year to second grade this year, all the kids that were the number of students that were in the grade last year increased through this year. So it can go up or down. Anything a 1 or over is either staying the same or increasing, and anything below a 1, so like 0.9 or whatever, or 0.8, would be a decrease. So it would be a decrease from grade 1 to grade 2, from last year to this year. If that makes sense. Does that make sense, everybody? So that's how the survival multiplier works for grades 1 through 12. And for birth to kindergarten, it's a little bit different, but the same concept. Basically, we take the number of students born, or the number of kids born within the district 5 years ago, and then when that 5 years later, when they enroll in kindergarten, that's how we kind of create that multiplier. So for this year, for example, in 2015, if there was 100 kids born, and then there was 120 kids enrolled in kindergarten this year, then that would be a birth to kindergarten ratio of 1.2. That makes sense as well? So this is a look at what we projected for this year and what the actual enrollment was. If you can see, I know it's probably a little hard to see, but this is the actual enrollment over here, and this is what we projected enrollment for this school year would be last year. This should be towards the end of the packet. It should be one of the last 3 pages. I'll give everyone 1 second to get there. Oh, I'm sorry, not one of the last few pages. At the end of the index. I believe it's one of the last sections. Is that possible? So this should be page.
You go ahead, Josh.
Okay,
Don't worry.
sorry, I didn't write down what page it was on, but so basically, as you can see, overall, overall's over here. Overall, actual enrollment outperformed what I projected last year by 0.7%. If you remember my presentation last year, I kind of projected that enrollment was going to go down really fast, and there was a number of factors. It had mostly to do with the birth to kindergarten survival ratio. It was really low last year, and it kind of is a big red flag for the projection, so it kind of accelerated decline. I was a little bit cautious about that. It didn't seem like that was really what was going to happen, but that's kind of what was happening based on last year's trend. So that is factors into why that last year's was a little bit lower, and actual enrollment this year was a little bit higher. So as you can see over here with the total, there was 9,409 total students enrolled this year, and we projected 9,343, so about 66 more than we projected. The biggest difference between the projections and actual come in kindergarten and first grade. Kindergarten is always kind of you never really know what you're going to get. You just kind of roll the dice and see, so it's very hard to predict, but we do our best. And then first grade, there was 57 more students actually enrolled than what we thought would be enrolled. So that's a good sign. That means that the trend of the low birth to kindergarten survival ratio that we saw last year not hold through this year. So that's a good sign for stability and growth. Any questions about that? Before we continue, I just want to, over here, I'm probably going to talk about projections in grade cohorts. And what that means is a consolidation of the grades, so K through 5, 6 through 8, or 9 through 12, so elementary, middle, and high school. So this is a look at the past 20 years of enrollment, and I wrote this down, this is on page 19. So if you guys want to get a better look at it. So this is the past 20, so over here you see the district started in 2001, 2002, with 9,128 students. And this grew pretty consistently through that a whole decade. That was a good trend, not just in this district, but around the region. There was a lot of growth in that decade. And it hit its peak in 2008, 2009, with 9,869 students. So this is the highest in the past 20 years that the district's enrollment has been. And this will come into factor later on, but notice that 2008, 2009 was about 12, 13 years ago. So that last large enrollment period has now kind of moved through the district, and you'll see examples of that as we go through. But since then, there was about 10 years of stability, or a little more than 10 years of stability, and now you can kind of see that there's been a decrease in enrollment. This is kind of with the current generation being smaller, this is kind of a trend all around. And you can never really stay at your highest point forever, but enrollment has decreased down to 9,409 this year, which is a decline of 460 students since the 2008-2009 peak. So this is a look at just the kindergarten enrollment. Kindergarten is really important because it's kind of the fuel or the base for the rest of the grade cohorts. So a strong kindergarten class will usually, grow as it goes on, and a smaller one can cause declines through the grades as it goes on. So kindergarten is a really important factor. So as you can see, over here in 2005, 2006 was the 20-year high of 752. And it's a little, a little fluctuation, but it's been overall decreasing since then. Over here in 2020, 2021, kindergarten had its smallest class at 485. And I know that usually that would be a little surprising, but as we're going to see when we look at the birth data, the 2015 birth class was really small. So this actually wasn't a big surprise, and it wasn't as small as we anticipated it to be. So that's a good sign. Any questions so far? Am I going too fast?
No.
So this is a look at the past 20 years of K through 5 enrollment. This black line over here is total enrollment, and this K through 5, this green one is K through 5. And note that these are on different scales, so it's not like K through 5 is ever more than total enrollment, 'cause that's not possible. We just made them a little closer so you could kind of see how they affect each other and how one goes and how total enrollment goes. They follow each other a little bit. You can see they have the same peaks and the same declines, so you can see how important K through 5 is in total enrollment. So K through 5 enrollment had its high in 2008, 2009 with 4,559 students, and it has decreased pretty steadily through the current year to 3,956, which is a decrease of 603 students since the high. And note again that 2008, 2009, that 12, 13 years ago, that these students have now moved all the way through here in the upper cohorts. Wow, that was about, but these students have now moved through the district. We'll see that. So moving on to 6-8, a little more sporadic. 6-8 generally for all the districts is a little sporadic. I don't really know why, but kind of random high jumps and increases. So it hit its height in 2013 and 2014, which 5 years after 2008, 2009 makes sense that would be that peak because that's that large class that's moving through. So that was a high of 2,453, and that has now moved down in the current year to 2,201. Last year was a little bit lower than this year, so this year saw a little increase, which is good. And that is an overall decrease from the peak of 252 students. And then lastly, we have 9 through 12. So now here you see 2018, 2019 was the high for this cohort, which is pretty recent, but that's that 2008, 2009 class that has moved through. So this hit its high in 2018, 2019 with 3,222 students, and has now declined to 3,137. Not a huge decline, but as we saw with the other cohorts, as K5 hit its peak and went down, and as 6-8 hit its peak and went down, it's likely that this will also has now hit its peak and is now on the downward trend. For 9 through 12, it takes a while for the trends to get there. So if there's a huge increase in K through 5, you're not going to see that here for, probably like 10, 12, 13 years as people move to district, but eventually we'll get to 9 through 12. So this is look at the birth data I was talking about before. Just overall, you can see that births have trended downwards overall. You can see this is the most recent year. Birth data comes from the Department of Health, and it's usually 2 years behind. So all these green years are years that we know the data for, and then these 2 black bars are the ones that we have to estimate for because we don't have that data yet. So in 2019, 2020, we typically take the average of the past 5 years and then put that together to kind of estimate what we think the next 2 years might have been. It's pretty hard to guess birth data because, as you can see, sometimes there's just random drops. There's kind of a trend of 2 years up and down. It kind of seems like what's been going on the past 3 years, but you never really know if that's going to continue. So that's kind of what we have here is kind of going down in up 2 years, but we have to wait until next year to know for sure. And as you can see here, in 2015, which is the birth year of the current kindergarten class, we only had 606 births. So that's why we were anticipating a really low kindergarten class, because that's a pretty low. I think the next one was 607 to be that low. And surprisingly, this one actually had a really strong survival ratio, and there was a lot of kids in this kindergarten class, which was really surprising. It didn't happen as well this year, but that's why we were anticipating it to be a little lower. So now we're going to look at development in the district. This is a look at the number of existing housing units in the district and how it's changed over time. So the decennial census every 10 years will give us an exact number of housing units that were in the district at that time. So as you can see, in 1980 it was 13,412, and it has grown pretty steadily over the past 30 years, 40 years. This is on page 10 for anyone that is following in the book. So it's been growing pretty steadily. In 2010, the last year we had an exact count, it was 26,548 total units. And then this year, since we don't have the decennial census data yet, we use the American Community Survey, which is their estimates generated by the Census Bureau. So they're not exact counts. So this isn't necessarily the exact number of units that's in the district, but this is the estimated number. And as you can see, it's still steadily growing, which is a good sign for the district. You know, so far we haven't seen a jump in births and kindergarten enrollment from more units in the district, but as more units are built, there's a possibility of more, you know, families, people starting families and young people moving in, and that could potentially lead to more enrollment. As you can see down here, the largest number of units in the district is the single unit detached, which is basically like a standalone house. A single family home attached would be kind of like a townhouse where it's like one family living in one unit that's connected to another unit, like on the side or above or whatever. So that's the majority, is single family units. It has 17,207 of single family detached and 2,343 of single family attached. This chart shows the number of existing home sales in the district. So these are housing units that already exist and were sold and someone moved into them. So this green bar is the median sales price of the home sales, and as you can see, it's been, after 2017 really, it's kind of jumped up. And what this really is an indicator for is interest in the district. So as your median sales price goes up, it usually indicates that people are more interested in moving into that area. So this is a pretty good sign for the district. It seems more people are interested in moving in here. This black line up here is the number of units sold. So as you can see, that's also been, it's fluctuated a little bit, but last year it saw its highest number of units sold, which is a good sign. That was 1,090 units last year that were sold. This isn't a final number. We only have this data through the beginning of November because obviously we haven't got to the end of the year yet. But so far, there has been 813 units sold in the district. And if you kind of average the number of units per month and multiply by 12, that would be approximately 975. So not quite as high as last year, but still really good. Being above 900 is a good place to be. So a pretty strong interest in moving into the district, which is a good sign. You know, it doesn't mean exactly people will move in and start families, but historically that's kind of the trend, so we'll have to wait and see. Any questions so far?
On your last slide, what would be really interesting, and I don't know if we could do this as a district or you guys could, but is there a way to keep track of number of students in a home, or the average number of students in a home? Because I think what's happening over the last, over a 10-year period, even a 20-year period, there's just smaller families.
Right.
And so, yeah, more homes are being built, but we're not seeing enrollment increase because there are less kids per home.
Yep.
And that's kind of, where the fluctuation point is just less kids less students per home.
Yeah.
That would be very useful in us, and maybe in the next few years we can get that information.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's pretty much dead on. In this section of the projection, I mentioned average family size.
Yeah.
The data we have now is an estimate, so it's not as strong as it could be next year when we have the decennial census data. That's what we'll really see that change between 2010 and 2020. They have, I believe they have both average family size and number of children in the home. so we can look at both of those data points and have a pretty strong sense of how it's changed. But with the ACS estimates, it is getting smaller, as you said, so that's kind of that fluctuation point.
I'd also be interested in the migration effect. If you ever go to track this, obviously people, because of COVID, moving from different areas
Right.
upstate.
Yeah, so that could be, I was actually thinking about that as I was doing this chart. I was wondering, like, is this, has there been a large jump of people moving up? I mean, we don't really know for sure. From what I've seen, I don't think as many people have moved into the capital district yet from the city. I think they've gone more to the Hudson Valley to kind of be a little bit closer to the city, but, we don't really know for sure. And in the coming months, that could happen. People could, move all the way up here if they want to, get away from the city or get away from, really dense urban areas. Yeah, something definitely to watch out for.
Naomi, did you have a comment?
Yes, there was one thing, the district does send a letter out to families to try to get a sense as to younger family members, and I don't know if this information is used in Mr. Millia's dashboard or how it's used for planning, but I suspect it is. And then the other thing I wanted to mention or rather ask is, do you work with any of the local realtors? Because the local realtors that I've talked to do have a good sense as to what's driving up home sales right now.
Yep, so we use, this data we get from, I think they've changed their name, but Global MLS Inc. is their name. And they kind of give us, it's funny because I'm actually, in the coming weeks, going to look at an analysis of kind of home sales from them. We didn't have that data for here, but that is definitely something maybe in the future that we could add into this. I don't know exactly the extent of what they have yet because I haven't gone in to do my analysis yet, but that is something. It's funny that we talk about this because it's something that is coming up for me, and maybe next year we'll have migration data, and we can kind of see if that's happening.
And I had one other question, and actually this is for Mr. Millian. So he did a presentation, I think it was early October, on the dashboard, and it was asked at that time if the numbers were slightly higher because of students that were what was driving that, and I think it was Dr. Robinson that had said there were some students coming into back to public school from private school during this pandemic. And so I don't know, but I guess I'm asking, are those numbers in line with what we're seeing with your report? And maybe that's a question better for Mr. Millian.
So, I'm like, I don't know where to look. I'm looking at Mrs. Stevens. Actually, there's a couple of different things. We do have a transfer back into the public schools in the district from the private schools. We also have a significant increase in homeschooling. Last year, I ran the numbers this morning. Last year on this date, we had 216 homeschooled children in the school district. Today, we have 350. And 3 years ago, we had about 175. So homeschooling has almost doubled in the last 3 school years. And I think that's where you're also seeing a bigger piece of that. And we had some small private school closures in the district. And so that would affect the elementary schools, not the middle or the high school. We had some of those as well. So those pieces all kind of fit in with our numbers. And it might actually add to Josh's prediction of a slowing of the decrease, because people certainly weren't counting on those kinds of things a year ago. Nobody expected that we'd be sitting here today wearing masks. So I think that that's also part of what people see. But the private schools across the state, from the data that I've seen, are also, believe it or not, getting a fair share of students, not from here, but from other areas and other public schools, because the private schools are able to bring everybody in. They have lower enrollment, so they can bring the entire student body in because they've got the physical space to do it. So all those things factor in somehow during this.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
So this is the actual grade-to-grade projection. So as you can see, this is on page 14 in the book there. So as you can see, this is, this is 2020, 2021. I think just on here it says that. Oh, it shouldn't say that on the, but,
I don't think it's on page 13.
oh. I wrote down the wrong thing.
It's okay.
Oh, you know what? This actual chart, yeah, this is in the appendix. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, this is actually 2020, 2021. I just forgot to change that in the presentation. But as you can, so this is the current year, and then this is the next 5 years, what we projected based on the survival multipliers. So over here, we go to, by 2025, 26, we project 9,208 students enrolled, which would be a 201 student decline from 2020. And if you were here last year, that's really different from what we projected 5 years from last year, which is a really good sign. That rate of decline has slowed a lot, based on the birth to kindergarten ratio. Last year was, I believe, 0.72, somewhere around there, and this year was 0.8003. So it was a pretty significant increase. It's not totally all the way back to the average. I think the average birth to kindergarten survival ratio is 0.86. But because of, maybe because of COVID, maybe not, but it's on its path back, which bodes well for the district and enrollment. So that is kind of the reason that projection has slowed. I think the last slide of the projection, I'll show the last year's projection compared to this one, so you can kind of see how different they are. But this next one should be. So this is just kind of a chart look at what we were just looking at. This is overall and total enrollment. As you can see, a bit of an evening off of the decline. So likely to continue to decline, but not at an increased pace, which is a good sign and which is normal when you have a smaller generation of students coming in. So now we'll look at the 3 grade cohorts individually and kind of go through their projections for each one. So as you can see here, K through 5 has been declining since 2011, 2012. A little bump up here, but this year 3,956 total students in K through 5. And we actually project stability, in a little increase, but overall stability in the cohort, which is a really good sign. Up to 3,991 students, which is on my other page. An increase of 35 students, so not a huge increase, but that shows stability, which is a really good sign, because if you continue to get stability in K through 5, then eventually you're going to get stability in your overall total enrollment, and that decline will slow and slow and slow, and then either be really small or will stay where it is. So stability is a great sign. So this is 6 through 8. Further stability, this is also, going down a little bit more than the change in K through 5 was. As you can see over here, this year it was 2,201 students in 6 to 8, and by 25, 26, 2,149. So that is a decrease of 52 students. So, a decrease, but still, if we're seeing stability in K through 5, that will eventually get to 6 through 8 and kind of curve off that small decline. And this is the 9 through 12 enrollment. So this is basically just kind of on its own, because whatever happened in K through 5 isn't going to get here. So that stability we see in K through 5 would likely not show up in 5 years, but in 10 or 12, 15 years. To get to this cohort, as you can see, in 2020, 21, we have 3,137 students in 9 to 12. And in 2025, 26, we have 2,953 students. So it's expected to bottom out around here in 2024, 25, and then kind of jump back up a little bit. That usually happens when you kind of hit your low point. You usually come, see a jump back up, because the low point, it's like a little bit of a rebound. So this is what I was talking about before, the comparison over time. So this is 2018's report. This is last year, 2019's report, and then this is this year's. So as you can see, there's a pretty significant difference. which is a good sign because I think this was kind of a worst case scenario, that if that birth to kindergarten ratio was going to stay low, then this is what enrollment was going to look like, and it was going to decline pretty fast. I think it got all the way down to like 8,200 approximately, around there. But now it's expected to be more steady, which is closer to the 2018 projection. In 2018, we projected it to kind of decrease along the same path that we're projecting now. But there was a surprise drop a little bit over here that we weren't anticipating. But now we're kind of back on that path of slow decline. So this is, we sometimes call this like a Goldilocks zone. But I think this year this is more of kind of like a worst case scenario zone where if that birth to kindergarten ratio is going to be a little bit lower, then somewhere between green and red is where projection would end up. But if it's going to be a little bit higher, probably somewhere between blue and green is where it'll end up. I kind of lean towards more along this path or up a little bit. I don't think it'll get down here, but we'd have to wait and see. So that is everything. There's a little bit more in the reports. So if you read through it and you have any questions for me, my email's up here. It is, oh, my email's not up here. Well, my email is joshua.tossi, T-O-C-C-I, @cdrpc.org. So if you have any questions for me, you're reading this and you see something, you have a question, you feel free to reach out to me, and I'll try to do my best to answer you. This is our website, cdrpc.org. This is our Facebook. So does anyone have any questions about anything I said or anything you saw in here or anything at all?
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
So I just want to, just one quick acknowledgement. This has been an annual thing for the board. I can certainly say for the last 15 years, and it was prior to me coming here. And Mr. Melia has been the point person. And tonight is actually Mr. Melia's last board meeting, technically. But I heard that he'll be home watching the board meetings as a part of his entertainment options. Along with Mrs. DeFisciano, they'll be having popcorn and watching the board meetings and say, I can't believe we ever sat through those things for so long. So, Bob, thank you, Ben, for your service to the school community. The board acknowledged it before, so I want to say thank you, Bob, for that as well. And Kelly will be with us a little bit longer still, so we still got some opportunities to tap into her wisdom for a few more months here as well. So thank you for that. Want me to continue?
Please do.
So I just want to shift gears a little bit and talk about a topic that's becoming pretty prominent topic of discussion across the state. And the governor has been issuing press conferences essentially every day related to the spread of COVID and clusters and things of that nature. And so this presentation is actually two links, and I'm just going to click on this real quick and come back to it. One is, as you see here, I'm not going to go to the document, but probably daily we get these updates coming from the Department of Health that talks about defining the regulations and new regs and things of that nature as things unfold at the state level. Oops, what did I do here? Okay, let's try that again. So, note to self, let's not go to any of the web links again. So the web links are there. The only reason I kind of do it for twofold. One, from a resource for myself. So as we're storing information, we could always have that point of reference to go back to presentation in terms of where information is coming from. There's also a web link that talks about the cluster zones and the yellow zones and things of that nature as well. So certainly people who access this presentation can access those web links as long as the web links are live at the state level. They're not our web links, it's going to the state. So New York State has this cluster initiative, and again, it's a web link that describes the cluster initiative. I'm just going to quickly highlight that in terms of that the initiative divides the clusters in basically three categories. The red zone is basically the hot zone where you truly do have a COVID cluster itself. The orange zone is what they define as the warning zone, and the yellow zone is the one that's pretty popular. So if you even heard the news today, there's a real concern that Albany County, Saratoga County, surrounding counties could be very well moving towards or being designated as a yellow zone. So this yellow zone one is where I want to focus some of the conversations on tonight. And the real focus is on addressing the clusters is a way to prevent community spread. And it's important because there are a lot of people want to say inconveniences, but I'm not sure if being sick or dead is an inconvenience that we can offer up. I don't want to be as vivid as that, but the reality of it is we have to figure out somehow to contain the COVID spread. So how we do it is debatable, but why we doing it should not be debatable. And so I want to make sure that point is. So we hope that we never have a situation. One, I would hope that we never be in a yellow zone, but we certainly hope that we're never in a situation where we're in a red or orange zone, because this is when we have real issues. But just in case, the current initiative from the state saying that basically if we're in one of these zones, we're shutting down automatically for a number of weeks and start going through a whole bunch of process. So I won't go through those processes, but one of the things that a big part of that is a lot of testing of a lot of people in order to not open, but to remain open if you're in one of those red or orange zones. So again, I just want to make sure people understand that the focus of this conversation isn't about red and orange zone. It's about more so the reality of what a yellow zone might look like. And I'll go into some data in a second. So the zones are defined by geographic areas. And so there's a tier 1, a tier 2, tier 3. We're in the tier 2 kind of geographic areas, and basically it's counties of 150,000 or more people. That's where you kind of fall in that tier, and then based upon that tier, there are different description of how a yellow zone or red zone or orange zone, for that matter, would be designated by the state. So it's not a school district. As a school district, we don't designate if we're in a zone. We're going to be designated to that based upon numbers. Here's where you fall as you fall into that sequence. And a big part of that is a geographic area that has 7-day rolling average, a positivity rate of 3%. And so when you look at it right now, Albany County, for example, is, if I'm not mistaken, could be in day 2 or day 3 of this rolling average. So if it stays 3% over that period of time, 7 days over a 10-day period, then they'll be designated as a yellow zone. So people are really concerned because, unfortunately, COVID numbers aren't going down. COVID numbers are actually going up. And so there's real concern in terms of that 10-day and the 7-day rolling average sequence. And the big and is important. So you could be the 7-day, and 12 or more newly daily cases. But the likelihood is if you're having 3% more than 7 to 10 days, you're going to have the other one as well. So that's that piece of it. And the interesting piece of it is we don't have a lot of zip codes here in Shen, but yeah, places where say for instance the city of Albany have multiple zip codes, and so you can have a designation within an area within a larger area. And so it makes the designation piece as not as straightforward as people would like to think it is. However, again, the likelihood of neighborhood X just being so isolated from neighborhood Y is unlikely, more likely. If something is happening here, just a matter of time before the effect is going to be felt there as well. So but I just want to point it out that it's also try to be very specific and not try to do everything with one full swoop as well. So we're watching this. We're watching other counties because if other counties and other school districts are faced with a yellow zone, there are issues that impact families, impact staffing, and all of a sudden, if staff is impacted in another county, it impacts us. If some of our staff lives in another county and things of that nature. So that's where the regional effect for us is so important for us to watch how things are playing out in the region. When I say the region, what I call the kind of tri-county region that we call the capital district, so to speak. So we're watching that very closely as we move forward. And here's some key questions once we get into the yellow zone, some things that people want to know. So the whole notion that if we are designated the Shen district, the question that they're trying to answer with this is in-person instruction a significant driver of local viral spread?
So in other words, if there's a yellow zone on designation, the question that we have to answer is in-person instruction a significant driver of local viral spread? And one way to try to answer that is testing. So testing about 20% of your student and staff population. So when we look at those numbers for us between student and staff, we're talking about 11,000, little over 11,000 bodies, if you will. And so if you look at 20% of that 11,000 bodies, just do the math in my head, you're talking about maybe about 2,400 people. And of that 2,400 people, you have to have a test number that's lower than the average 3%. So you're talking about maybe about 70 people of the 2,300 that you test has to be less than 70 have to be positive. If it's more than 70, you can't come back in person. So still a lot of testing. When you think about testing 2,300 people in a short window in order for us to come back to in person, because when we say window, we're talking about 3 or 4 days windows, not weeks windows. To come back in person, it's a lot of work to do so in a second. And so we're in a process, again, back to the regional conversation. In fact, we have a call on Monday morning. I'm looking at Mrs. Carmen to make sure she's confirming with me, with some folks regionally to try to figure out if we collectively in the region we have to go this way, what's the capacity to effectively do so, to administer the test. We're learning from a lot of school districts in Western New York, particularly in the Syracuse area. A lot of those places are in the yellow zone right now. And a lot of those places, if you watched the news last week, there was a lot of stories on schools testing. And so there's some private companies that are doing it because schools don't have the capacity. Health departments, they don't have the capacity to effectively come in and say we're going to administer 2,300 tests to folks, and they're just for Shen. So just think about that now, so if you do the whole composite of school district, that's a lot of testing in a short window. So we have a call on Monday to try to figure out how do we then try to prepare for if this happens, how can we prepare to be able to quickly react to see if our numbers prove out to allow us to be back in person education. And that's important when you think about 80% roughly of our student population go to school in person. So that's why that also an important piece of why the driver of that piece as well.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Who's paying for these tests? Like, how
So
does that work?
So the test right now is supposed to be provided by the state.
Free.
The test is supposed to be provided by the state. We just have to come up with the process to effectively administer those tests. So could there be
Like a designated
potentially,
location?
yeah, more likely be. Based upon experience of schools are doing it, it's at a school site.
Okay,
So it's open up your school sites and having a testing factory going.
got it.
And it's the quick test. It's the swab. You put it away. Next, swab, put away, and then test them, and see what the numbers are. So I'm going to go through some of those details in a second, though.
Okay.
But I just want to point out the 20% piece. And a big part of this too is important that there's no designation to say that of that 20%, X number has to be students, X numbers has to be staff. It's just 20% of whatever that population of student and staff is. So we can do 19.9% of our students and 0.1% of staff, or vice versa. Just exaggerate the point of trying to make sure that people understand that, because there are always questions like, well, I suppose I don't want my child to be tested. Well, we have about almost 10,000 of them to choose from. So we hope that we could get enough to do this, and we hope that also people see the importance of participating in this to get us as a community back on track if we ever find ourselves in a yellow zone.
It would behoove us to do a cross-function, I mean, a
Oh,
whole
yeah.
cross.
We
Okay.
want to see that, because
Yeah,
you want to be
you
able to see.
definitely want to, yeah.
Yeah, you want to be able to see if this is a community spread and where the spread might be
Yes.
potentially come.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So some key question again, some key components of it. If we are testing young children, particularly, initially I want to say under age 16, but I'm not sure if that's the age of consent for medical purposes. There's a difference in that piece of it, but generally we're going to say parental consent is going to be required because most of our students are under age 18 anyway. And so parental consent is one of those kind of things. Looking at if we were to have something like this on site, because clearly we have the facilities to effectively do it. Looking at the possibility of a third party. When I mean third party, we don't have enough people. Yes, some of our nurses could go through the process and train to do that, but we don't have the capacity to do that. So to have a potential third party, that's what some of the conversations on Monday is going to be about. School districts, again, being designated by a testing site based upon the counties basically deputizing schools to effectively do so. And so those kind of things that we, and I've mentioned before, it's not mandated who must get, it's pretty flexible across the board. The testing locations, as I said before, is a big piece of it. Again, we have the benefit of having a lot of facilities here. Local health department designating us. The rapid test kit right now is supposed to be free. Back to your question, that's what they use in the rapid. And so the question is, hopefully they'll continue to be available and readily available to do so, and hope that we don't have such a bad situation that we don't have enough tests. So let's hope that's not the case at all. And so big part of that too is protection of personal identifiable information, because it's still people's medical records. So, we can't, for all those people say, give me the list of all the people who tested and what their results are. No. This is not, it's still people's personal record, medical record. And believe me or not, based upon some experience of colleagues, you have people who want to demand to know who are the people what their results were, which is, I'm not sure why you want that information, but people demand interested information all the time. So that's that. Here's an interesting website. The county has, and hopefully this will show up. So the county has this website with all these things. So this chart right here, I'm sure I could break it out at some point, but this is as of today. You see the date here. So in the county, as of Saratoga County, case in the last 7 days, 314 cases. The 7-day rolling average for us is 2.27.
Creeping up. Yeah.
So the magic number is 3. So I got to tell you, for people who don't think this is a point of concern, we wouldn't be having this conversation, by the way, if it was a point. It's concern. So it could be an issue, concern, problem, crisis. So we're right at that concern going into the problem mode. But before we go into the problem mode, we're trying to have a plan, so if we get into the problem mode, we can address it to avoid the crisis mode. So kind of give you the sequence of how things progress. So this is a neat slide that talks about that and the total number of cases, total number of deaths, and those kind of things. Current active cases in the county, 272 active cases. And then there's a slide also over here. Say, for instance, on this graph, it's kind of hard to see. But right now, in the town of Clifton Park, for example, there are 434 confirmed cases as of right now, current data in the town of Clifton Park. The town of, let's see, scroll up, I think half of them are at the top. Nope.
Keep going to alphabetical, I think. Oh, maybe not.
Their Half Moon is 260 cases, for example. And Saratoga City is
600.
And that's a lot.
so when you think about it, and those, if you looked at this chart a week ago, the numbers were maybe a fraction of what they are. So I kind of monitor, I kind of look at this anytime I want to depress myself to see that the numbers are constantly going up. But this is a neat graphic for us to keep seeing. But this is like the reality check that this is something that we have to keep our fingers on the pulse of as we go from week to week. I'm just trying to get back to where we're. So that's the one data point. The state also has, and this last one I'll click on. The state also has a dashboard where you can type in into the dashboard, like where you live and stuff like that, and give you some sense of, is your neighborhood a cluster neighborhood or not a cluster neighborhood? So it goes right down to that piece of it, but also give, just from a big picture perspective, some of the numbers across the board as well. So for instance, you see some of the zones right here. So the 7-day Schenectady County is at 2.7, for example. So just give you a flavor, Albany County is at 3.0, Greene County 3.0. Then you have some places out in western New York that are at 7. So you see some huge spikes that's taking place across the state. And I share this because we all have a part to play in this reality. One, to keep ourselves safe, and two, in turn, try to keep someone else safe. To me, that's a pretty simple proposition, regardless of what people may think about the implication of COVID or the whatever. The reality of it is, the numbers are proving out that we're seeing more cases as we move forward. So from a school perspective, we're trying to have a plan in place. If we get to a point that we are faced with a yellow zone situation within the school district, our objective is to keep our schools open. That's our objective, to keep our schools open and to do what we need to do within our schools, to do what we need to do to ask our community to help us by the things that people do and the decisions people make. And so we're taking all the protocols. Even our contact tracing process is very precise. We really try to understand where cases are going from, and just from it's more anecdotal because we haven't ran numbers per se, but we're starting to see now more cases, what I call a sibling effect, where if it's 3 siblings in a household, all 3 siblings are getting COVID. And for us as a school, and we've seen it, where a sibling is in an elementary school, a sibling in the middle school, and a sibling in the high school. And all of a sudden, one incident, so to speak, right, has such a ripple effect on 3 different buildings, and within those buildings, in multiple situations, we've seen sibling effects within the same building. Someone in one grade, another in another grade, and the ripple effect is a piece that sometimes people say, you know, we have a lot of cases, but not really. And the second piece, that knock on wood, and it doesn't matter where people are getting COVID, it's a bad thing, but we don't have the transmission taking place in schools. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it, kudos, I got to give kudos to parents. More and more parents, when their kid is not feeling well, they're taking it seriously. They're getting the kids tested. They're not sending their kids to school. That was the first big concern about, is that are people not sending their kids, when your kid is sick, keep your kid home and figure it out. And so, one, it minimized the number of the contact tracing that we have to do, and therefore the number of people in quarantine. And related to that, too, I want to emphasize that there's a big difference in not only terminology and definition, but impact of someone who is tested positive for COVID is in isolation. We quarantine, or through the county, quarantine people out of abundance of caution. There's a difference between quarantine and isolation. Isolation, you got it. Quarantine, we're trying to prevent you from having it, and we don't know if you have it, and it may manifest at some point, so we're trying to avoid the spread, and so subsequently the quarantine situation. And I know it's a challenge. We've had situations where kids have been quarantined twice because they happen to be in a class with someone who tested positive. And we know it's a challenge. We know it's a challenge on families. However, it's a challenge that we all have to recognize. We have to figure out how we contend with. For students, we've been able to pivot and try to keep the educational process going, but we know that there are implications beyond even education for some of our students. And so it's important, and it's important, particularly as we going into this holiday season. You know, I want people to embrace what the holiday season stands for. You know, to be thankful, grateful for love of family, friends, and otherwise. And as you embrace the love of family and friends, make sure you're doing the right thing so we continue to be able to embrace the love of family and friends. Because that's important. It's important, folks. The numbers aren't lying, and the numbers are increasing. And I want our schools to stay open, and we're going to keep trying to do what we can. That's why we're going through these things now, and that's why next week we're working through some folks that have plans in place that if we find ourselves in a yellow, we can quickly execute and start doing what we need to start doing to figure out where we truly stand here in the Shen community. So let me stop there in case there are specific questions from board members or even Grace as a student.
I have a question or a request to make.
Go ahead.
Okay. So first I want to say thank you for sending out the video. We
So I'm gonna say, let's see, because it's a part of a larger video piece, so we'll see how that plays out, but thank you for this, and certainly for folks, this is actually accessible on the website, on the board piece as well, so we could even, point to that, as a point of reference, to folks, so thank you.
Lisa,
Yeah,
do you have a question?
yeah, and not even a question, but just to, maybe if it was even just like linking that slides or something similar to it
Sure.
on the website, because I know even just this week alone, so many people have asked me, what's the rate that we close at and are we close to it? And I'm like, well, I mean, I can like, I don't want to give you the stuff from August. So I think that would just be good to have out there, because it's updated and also because there's the links to the like where you could see the cases per day and stuff like that. I think that'd be really useful for a lot of people.
Yeah.
For comfort.
Yeah, and again, at the same time, we'll look and see how we can
Yeah.
cut piece of raw straight, yes, thank you.
I know some of the questions out there, Dr. Robinson, have been about, what about closing between, some of the holiday events, and I think people are just feeling pretty anxious about some people not necessarily being safe. So I believe that we're not, COVID's not being spread in school, and I do believe that when they're in school, we know where they are, and they're wearing their masks, and they're distant, and being out of school can be a little bit, we don't know. But, I mean, is that ever something that you would consider?
So I'm not sure it's a me consider, not consider, I think that one, we're following the data, so to speak, and in terms of the number of cases, and I don't have offhand the number of cases we have, but in proportion to our population, it's very small.
Right.
I mean, less than 0.5%. And so I got to put that into context, right? And then also the context of all the stuff we spoke about here, because whatever actions we take, the question is, what's the problem we're trying to solve, and can we do that consistently over again? And so where's that trigger point? When does it get to the point that we do close or not close, those type things? And so that's one part of it as well. Another piece too is that sometimes, and I've heard people say, well, so-and-so closed their school, why aren't we doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, everyone's circumstances is different. And without calling name of school district, I know 3 of my suburban colleagues I was on the phone with today. They're closing their school not because of COVID cases. They're closing their school because they got some of the staff that's quarantined because of the circle that happens. And so all of a sudden, if you have 24 staff members quarantined, you don't have the bodies to effectively, even if you were to say those people are teaching virtually and the kids are in person, someone still need to be here with the kids when they're doing virtually. And so it's not necessarily it's a result of COVID, but a lot of cases, people making these decisions. I think last week, there are at least 2 school districts that was completely shut down, small places, because especially some of these small places with one building, and if they have a one building K-12 in a building and it happens, they're done, they're shut down because they don't have the capacity. So it's a question of capacity, and I think one of the things we try to balance here is the capacity issue for us, and we have had some interesting pinch points at a particular grade level where because of a situation we had to have teachers at a grade level quarantine in a particular building, but we were able to backfill with some capacity to keep the educational process going in a seamless way. So the answer to your question is, as long as we could keep doing that, and as long as we could keep doing that in a safe way.
Mhm.
And so that's the question. And so if the overall community situation deteriorates so fast that it's impacting our schools, clearly school is a part of the community is part of the school. So those are the kind of things, and that's why this conversation, we're watching those things to see where it's going, where the trend line's going, as well. And we have a lot of, I mean, there isn't a single day that multiple times a day that Mrs. Carmen, who is our COVID coordinator, is on the phone with people from Saratoga County Health. And so we're always trying to figure out what can we do to try to curb the situation. And there's no single answer to it. And I would hate for people to think, and again, the conversation we had, right? So we tell people, so you're going to do this, but the next day, when the cases come up, what you're going to do then? Versus what's the longer term plan if our objective is to do both, balance safety and balance accessibility. And it's a delicate balance, I gotta tell folks. It's not an easy balance. It's a delicate balance between the two things. So, Mr. Stevenson, more to come. Never a dull moment. And you know, and these are the things, since I just had the floor for a second, these are the things that I think that we should all pause and truly just give thanks. I mean, these are the moments in life where we should truly just all pause and say, you know what? All the baggage that I've held, I'm letting it go. You know, all the people who, whatever I have grudges for, I'm forgiven. Because, you know, I think in so many ways when you see the challenges that, not only the health challenges, the financial challenges, the psychological challenges that people are facing, we truly have to become more and more our brothers and sisters keepers, more and more. And it's not necessarily even people that you know. It's about, you know, the kind words goes a heck of a long way than the nasty, sarcastic comment that may have just beat down a person who was on his or her last straw, versus you could have uplifted that person to keep going for another day. So I hope people kind of see that as also part of our responsibility, because the psychological toll of COVID is so pervasive. It's in all aspects of our lives. And I think that we all have to take a breath. Take a breath and try to, because when you do something positive, by the way, you feel better yourself. You know, and so I guess that's kind of like my wishing all you happy Thanksgiving as we go into this holiday season, to just take that breath and try to do something positive, because if selfishly it make you feel better, but it certainly provides that support for someone else, and you never know who needs that kind word. I can't even say a smile nowadays because you don't see the smiles, right? So you got to just have the smiling eyes at people. But those kind words, those kind gestures goes much longer than sometimes the comments that people make out of frustration. So thank you for your indulgence.
You know, I'm going to, and I'll be totally honest, I'm emotionally spent this week, over the last couple weeks. So I'm going to leave that. I think Dr. Robinson put that in a nice pre-holiday box for all of us. And I'm going to leave it there.
Thank you.
So with that, I'm going to call a motion for adjournment. Bob is first, Gus is second. All in favor? Naomi?
I think that was an aye.
Aye, okay.
Sounded like an aye.
Okay. Meeting's adjourned.
All right, have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
You too.
Same to you.